Hi there, and welcome to Enterprise AI Innovators, a show where top technology executives share how AI is transforming the enterprise. In each episode, guests uncover the real-world applications of AI, from improving products and optimizing operations to redefining the customer experience. I'm Evan Reiser, the founder and CEO of Abnormal AI.
And I'm Saam Motamedi, a general partner at Greylock Partners.
Today we're talking with Mike Trkay, Chief Information Officer at FICO. Now, most people know FICO for credit scores, but its software actually powers many of the invisible decisions happening around us every day. The fraud alert on your credit card, TSA security screenings, even logistics systems figuring out which packages go on which trucks. They've been doing machine learning at scale long before the current AI wave. A few things stuck with me from this conversation. First, Mike talked about how the AI hype cycle is maturing. We're past the isn't this cool phase of 1,000 small pilots, and companies are now asking harder questions about ROI and picking just a few bets to go deep on. Second, he made a compelling point about the differences between focused language models and general purpose LLMs. His example was great. If you're in financial services and you say treatment, you mean collections recovery, not skincare. General models get that wrong, and in regulated industries, that kind of precision matters. Finally, he's got advice I think every CIO needs to hear. Just assume your people are already using ChatGPT or something similar, and some of them are probably pasting in sensitive data without realizing it. His take is this: don't fight it. Give them a secure, sanctioned option before shadow AI becomes a real problem. Mike, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Saam and I were looking forward to this episode for many reasons. But before we go into some of the technology stuff and innovation stuff, do you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about your background? Kind of what do you do today, and kind of what inspires you and motivates you to do that?
Yeah. So today I'm the CIO here at FICO. It's a little bit unique of a role than what you think of when you hear the term CIO. I do tend to have a lot of the traditional CIO functions. Think about like back office IT, the systems we use to run our business. But that's probably about 10-15% of my mind share. The bulk of my focus is really on the technical operations and customer support associated to our enterprise B2B SaaS and PaaS business, right? So it really is about how do we run our platform for consumption by our customers. Once it's kind of GA'd, my team takes everything from the pipeline for deployments to the solution support, customer onboarding, to the customer experience and customer support. We're the one picking up the phone when people got questions and issues. So didn't get into that space by design necessarily. I was an engineer by background in education, really kind of in a mechanical structural sort of space. Chased the money a bit and went into management consulting when that was the thing to do when the big five were still the big five. But I always call it the best MBA I never paid for, right? Because I was in a group at the time that was a small group that we were. I was a consultant. It would be the C-suite and a couple of our partners. And this is, I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but like 1998, and it's Bank of America going like, what is online banking? And should we be getting into that? Or Warner Music going like, Napster's just a bunch of kids downloading music in their dorm rooms. There's no real business model there. And we spent years talking about what is technology and how can it be used to help transform the business. And from there, it just kind of moved me into management and technology roles throughout my career at different places in media and entertainment, and now into the software space at FICO.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about what do you guys do? How do you help consumers?
A lot of what people don't realize is that your FICO score is really a model, right? It's an analytic model that you apply a set of data to, and it gives you basically a risk assessment or a risk score of credit worthiness for an individual. Well, we have a number of other software products and that kind of do other analytics embedded into the software to kind of solve those problems, right? So everything from Evan, if you've ever been flagged by extra security by the TSA, right? That's actually FICO software running in the background, right? That's doing that. Saam, if you ever get that phone call that says, hey, Saam, we see some weird transactions on your credit card. Can you validate this is you? Like FICO owns like 80% of that market globally in terms of like fraud and risk management. Big logistics companies run our software to figure out what boxes go on what trucks or what airplanes pull into what gates to minimize the transfer time for crews and passengers and everything like that. So if it's an analytics sort of problem, right, that is something that is going to be a high value decision, but is repeatable, right, that you're doing over and over again. This is where FICO has now for decades played a big role. So we've had, whether it was AI, analytics, ML, pick the kind of the term of the moment, right? And we've been in that space now for quite a long time, and figured out how to really operationalize that, run it at scale, ultra low latency, right? Kind of make it enterprise class and enterprise worthy.
You've been through multiple of these technology waves. Where are we in this AI cycle, and what's making you sort of the most optimistic as the technology continues to evolve?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from a hype cycle perspective, we are at the point where a little bit of the shine has come off the object, right? And that um, you know all of the pilots and kind of isn't this cool, and look at this neat thing that I can do, like we're leaving that phase and starting to get to the point of going, okay, but where's the true return on that investment, right? Or how do I operationalize that and make that actually part of the way that we operate as a business, not just little side projects of cool shiny new objects that people get to go play with in the lab in the corner, and then put on a demo, and that kind of ends the whole thing. So it's starting to be the moment where we're expecting a return on investment, where companies are starting to expect that. You're seeing a reduction quite a bit in the amount of or the concentration of investment, I should say, maybe more than a reduction, the concentration of investment that enterprises are making. Instead of spending $5 across 1,000 things, how do I spend, $500 on two things, right? Where it maybe gets a better return for what I'm trying to do, rather than just a bunch of little science projects. So it's that maturity of making it enterprise class, as opposed to just kind of leading edge technology, I think.
What do you think is it about the culture that's kind of enabled you guys to stay on the bleeding edge through like multiple generations of technology? Like very few companies do that.
From the product side and in our go to market, I do think that we've been here, and the reason a lot of people associate FICO with financial services is one of the early adopters, believe it or not, of a lot of this predictive AI and sort of technology was the financial services space, right? Because they were making decisions that were highly valuable decisions that could be systematized, and that's a perfect application for this technology, and they could justify the risk mitigation of avoiding fraud, or giving loans to the right people, right? Because the financial returns were so evident and so obvious. And so I think the great thing about this moment is not just that, hey, what we've been doing with financial services is now kind of being brought into the light, but there's so many other verticals who are starting to understand and appreciate the value of it. And at the end of the day, what we produce in our product is a decisioning engine, right? It's for predictive decisioning in a lot of ways, and that can be applied to telco or manufacturing or retail the exact same way that it could be applied to financial services. And so there's this broadening of the market that is really kind of the exciting moment in the opportunity, what we're gravitating towards, and really trying to drive in how we go to market with our products on that side. Internally, there's just a bunch of stuff. And, one of my favorite topics, and I talk about it all the time, is what's now called the event intelligence management, was maybe, called AI ops at other times in places, right? Or even ITOA, if I really go back a few years, right? Bunch of different names. But this is one of my favorite areas of how do I actually start to apply some of these tools and these technologies to do profile-driven anomaly detection. So I don't have to go create monitors anymore. I don't have to say, write a rule, go look for this. This is good, this is bad. It's profiling, and it's deciding, hey, that's abnormal for Mike. That's normal for Evan. This is abnormal for Saam. Like, it can figure that out and create those anomaly detections, those alerts, without some sort of static rule-based thing that needs to be done. Then how do I correlate those, right? So that I bring multiple sort of events together. Then how do I actually become predictive about what's the root cause of that? Then how do I actually take an automated action or do knowledge management? Hey, you've seen this before. Here's how it should be responded to, or this is what LLM or SLM or a large language model or small language model tells you is an action you should take, to the actual automation and the coding of that itself. There's so many applications just within that space. It's pretty exciting because we're finding new efficiencies and ways to work and not just get better, like fewer people, more efficient in how we work, but better results than what we've historically been able to, because the data sets, the telemetry data is becoming so big. No human can process it, but this is a perfect application and use case for AI, ML, and in computer technologies.
What do you think maybe people are underestimating about what's possible about the future?
The area that is really interesting to me is its general application around what I guess would be like CRM, right? Customer relationship management. Because at the end of the day, if I can build a profile of Mike Trkay, right, then and regardless of what Mike is doing, whether he's running a credit card, getting on a plane, renting a car, buying something at retail, like if I understand and can get this profile of him, I can really determine and detect anomalies, not based off of a specific application, but based off of an entity and how that entity is interacting with any other sort of kind of systematic, or system or use case kind of out there. And so the application of that, where you're breaking away from individual use cases and associating or tying it to an anchor of like an entity, a profile, a persona, I just think that opens up the door for a lot of unique applications where it almost becomes like a service to other systems, right? In that, it's just what I've got is a definition of Mike, and you want to plug into that definition of Mike, here you go. And then how you want to use that definition of him to solve your specific use case is kind of a little bit, that's your secret sauce in your juice. But what the really interesting thing could become is how do we really use it to understand the person, the individual better? Hyper personalization almost. I do think that you're going to see a bit of a commoditization of the large language models if we haven't already, right? And for enterprises, especially ones that are regulated, we're going to see a little bit more where small language models or focused language models become a more important part of the go-to-market, because you can't have the kid with the high school diploma or the maybe even the undergrad degree answering all the questions. Sometimes you need the PhD who speaks the jargon, understands the context, and it helps deal with some of the hallucination and bias and other things that could be influencing. I think you're going to see a big push kind of in that area around how enterprises and businesses looking for smaller language models that are specific to their use cases and industry. And then the last one I'll throw out there is, if it hasn't hit yet and you still get tastes of it in certain different geographies, because we're a global company, but the regulatory pieces that you're going to see around some of this AI, I think it's going to drive a lot in terms of opportunities for in this space around the responsible AI concepts, right? Whether that's the explainable AI or the auditable AI or the robust AI or the ethical AI, like tooling technologies that are either integrated into or become governing factors of AI so that companies can show and demonstrate that they're meeting what will become regulatory obligations they have around their consumption and use of AI within their enterprises. While it's definitely better than where it was with the chat bots, right, there's still a really big curve that people are struggling with, right, in terms of how do they take some of what they're doing with AI and truly making that, I use the word enterprise class all the time, but really what I just mean is operational. And this is where I'm a really big advocate of the idea of AI platforms, right? Because what I think, is AI platforms bring a lot of the integration, a lot of the governance, a lot of the elements that can result in kind of instability or poor performance or just kind of not meeting the customer expectations. And it takes that noise out of the equation and allows the companies to focus on the business outcome and the business value they're getting without having to spend as many cycles on how do I get these bits and pieces to work together. And so I do think that again, if you ask me again, like where do we see stuff going? These AI platforms and how they really provide that underpinning or the mechanical sort of elements to expedite people's use and time to value of AI, I think is going to be critical, or it's going to be one of the common factors for companies that are successful in how they're adopting it and utilizing it to transform their business.
If I'm a CIO listening to this episode and I'm just starting to build like the foundation for my teams to be able to take advantage of AI to drive real business outcomes, like what advice do you have for me? And maybe to make that question more tactical, like, are there 2 or 3 things that you would tell me to prioritize getting in place, right away to enable that?
If it's merely the adoption of maybe AI tools and AI tech that's integrated into some of the other systems that you're already leveraging and using, right? Hey, we use ServiceNow. They've got some AI tools that we use Salesforce. They've got some AI tools. There's a strategy and approach there that has more to do with your data integration, right? And your data management, because what you'll tend to find is that you get pools of data. And so when you're trying to interact with the whatever AI tool you're utilizing, right? That, oh well, this gives me information about the data that this system manages, and this gives me responses based off of, well, but I'm trying to get an answer that is holistic in terms of what it means to FICO as a business in its operation. And so either being able to create those large data lakes or something of that approach, which enterprises have spent literally, decades on in hundreds and millions, if not, if not trillions of dollars trying to do, or if there's a way to integrate to that data where it lies and have data pipelines that can help feed it, you're gonna find that to adopt and get that broad view perspective about your enterprise, you're going to need to have some sort of data integration, data pipeline sort of capability. On the other hand, if you're actually looking about like, hey, I'm not just consuming AI tools, but I'm developing tools that I want to use within my business, I'm going to go back to it's still data, but now it's a different sort of problem around data, and it's going to be about what's the quality of the data. Well, how clean is that data? And my data becomes almost a moat for me, right? If everybody's adopting these same set of tools, maybe not how I train it, but how I tune that model becomes very specific to the data set that's unique to me, that I have uniquely from every other enterprise, right? And so that becomes this competitive differentiator. But you're going to have to really make sure then that if that's your value proposition, you're treating it like the crown jewels that it is, right? And I do think that like the chief data officer, right, kind of role kind of comes back in full swing here, but not necessarily in the compliance role and function that people have historically associated it to, but actually into a value generation and AI data set, like making sure that you have the right data sets, the quality of the data that you can use it to train and tune your models so that it's either specific to the competitive differentiator you're building in to make, so that you get a better result, or so that you can use it to create the product that's going to make you guys more effective in how you're utilizing within your own business.
Are there kind of like quick wins where you're like, it'd be foolish to not kind of like make a couple investments here? Like, what would be kind of like your quick wins?
Yeah, I've got like a quick win, and I've got a must do, I guess, too. I think the must do is everybody who works for you and works in your company, they're going to go use one of the LLMs somewhere. And unintentionally, they're going to probably share data and proprietary data or IP or something like that, not with the understanding that there may be creating a data leakage problem for your enterprise. And so be open, be honest with yourselves, know that it's going to happen, and then embrace having some sort of, dedicated, it could still be Anthropic or OpenAI or Gemini or whatever you want, but, do the bedrock instantiation of that so that that data is not making it out into the wild and you have some sort of controls wrapped around it. So, number one is be honest, admit that it's going to get used, and do what's best for your company and take some sort of action to give your team and your staff an approach and a resource there that is in compliance, right? Because if you don't, they're going to just go out of compliance. It's going to happen. The early use cases though are, and it doesn't sound sexy, but there's things around, and I'll talk about three areas. I think that there's almost like an enterprise search functionality that's a really high value return. There's so many pockets of information that you have across your business sitting in disparate systems and different repositories. How do you actually get that all pulled together, respecting the data protections and data permissions that they need to, yet informing the response so that based on the role, I'm getting what is a complete answer, but limited to what I'm supposed to see. I think that's a really good, important early use case. I do think security is a very good early use case. The data sets are just too large for rule development and things like that to be done anymore. You really have to have a models-based approach to kind of how you tackle that problem. It's changing so dynamically that by the time you're writing a rule and getting it's too late, right? You've already missed the opportunity. And then I talked about the third, and I'm probably a little biased because I'm in the operational side of things here, but I do think that event intelligence or that AI ops space, where how do I apply this, again, to a massively large and growing data set of telemetry data, metrics, logs, and stuff like that to get me better at creating resiliency and availability and within the environment. Those are all places that I think people have the data already, that's already out there. They just need to learn how to tap into it, and that there are models that are already kind of available, third-party models that are designed around those use cases and functions that you can apply it to and get some quick time to value in kind of a really very fast ROI associated to it.
What would you say to like the cynics there that thinks like a giant large language model can solve every analytical problem, right? Like, why does that not work? And why do some of these use cases, right, that require different sets of tools?
Every tool in the toolbox has a perfect use case that it's designed for. And LLMs have this amazing breadth and have this general knowledge about a bunch of topics, right? But there's a risk associated to that when you start to go deep on any one particular topic. And that this is where you really start to see hallucination or bias and things like that really start to rear its head in a way that if you're not smart enough to know the answer in the first place, it's going to be hard for you to understand that the answer you're getting back is not correct either. And so there's a trust that you need to establish associated to these things. And so the idea of how do I actually create a model that I can trust and know I can trust for a very specific use case where accuracy is essential, right, to what you're doing, either because it's regulatory, it's life or death, quite literally life or death, and for if I was applying this in the medical field or something like that, there's a level of trust that you need to do. And so, one of the things that FICO's talked about is our FICO foundational models. Within that, you'll see a couple things. We do talk about our focus language models. These are small language models that are trained around very specific use cases within the financial services space, right? So when I use the word treatment, right, it understands I'm talking about a collections and recovery treatment. I'm not talking about what skincare treatment does Mike, because that's the general knowledge sort of confusion and hallucination that you can get with it, with what you're doing, right? On top of that, what we've also announced is there's a FICO, basically it's a trust score, right? So think about how we talk about your FICO score and the credit worthiness or the trust you should have in an individual. Well, how do I assess the trustworthiness of a model for the use cases that I'm looking to apply it to? And that becomes then this ability to kind of say, these are models that do a better job or have a higher trust sort of associated to for these use cases than maybe a general LLM or a general use case sort of language model that we should apply. And this gets away from, you can prompt engineer your way to better responses from the LLMs, right? But then everybody has to be this prompt engineering subject matter expert, right? To kind of get that, in place. How can you eliminate that risk by creating a focused language model that you can have what is a more natural sort of interaction with, which was one of the goals, right? If I'm a collections and recovery agent, right, I have a natural language interaction with it, but I feel confident and I can trust that the responses I'm getting back are specific to the use cases and the application that I'm trying to apply them to.
Okay, so Mike, for context, usually since we usually run out of time at the end, we like to do a bit of a lightning round where we ask you questions that we're looking for, like the one tweet response. Saam, do you want to maybe kick it off with the first one?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike, maybe to start, we've talked a lot about today's AI era and how a lot of things are changing. How should companies measure the success of a CIO in this AI era?
The CIO, I think, gets measured on how well are they helping enable all of the parts of the business adopt the AI technology in a, cost-effective, high return on investment, responsible sort of way.
What's your advice to maybe some of your peers who are trying to, just keep up with latest in AI? Like, what do you recommend?
I'm a reader by nature, so I just go into rabbit holes where I can lose myself for 2 hours researching something, not realizing I'm researching it.
Switching gears to the personal side, what's a book that you've read? It doesn't need to be work related, but a recent book that you've read that's had a big impact on you and why?
The name of the book is going to escape me, but it was a historical, not fiction, but historical biopic. It was actually on, it's one of those forgotten founding fathers. The whole thing was basically being in the shadow is not necessarily, a problem for strong leaders. And so it's a leadership oriented, but kind of historically biopic sort of thing. And which it was kind of recommended to me because a lot of times, CIOs and stuff like that, we tend to be kind of in the background. And so how do you, it was really kind of interesting in telling that, and to talk about like, you can still lead from, without being in the center of the stage and in the spotlight. And the impact that you actually have can be one of the longest lasting ones.
What's an upcoming technology you're most excited about? It doesn't have to be professional. It can also be just you're personally excited about.
I'm telling you that, what AI represents, I'm trying to think of something since the agrarian revolution that's going to impact humanity as much. And that's leapfrogging industrial revolution and technology information revolution. It's, in my mind, it's that big of a thing. So, I've got 3 young kids, right? A 6-year-old, 9-year-old, and 12-year-old. And so I think about it a lot in terms of what does it mean for them in not just in their life, not just for me in my life or me in my career, but how is it going to change? I can't see anything else that I can foresee that is more impactful, more interesting, more exciting.
If you fast forward 5 to 10 years, what do you think is going to be true about AI's impact on the world that most of our listeners today would consider science fiction?
I'm going to steal something a little bit that I heard 2 weeks ago. And that is, the way we think about interacting like with the internet today, it's all very UI based, right? And that we're, going to web pages and, looking at, I think that whole thing changed. I think the internet and what the internet is fundamentally changes and in how we interact with it. You're going to end up having websites that are interacting with AI agents, right? As the way of, and in the way that they need to be engineered and built and the way we interact just fundamentally changes. And so like, I do think it's going to be one of those, and I guess this is how it impacts, our life, but like, I'm not going to go surf the web anymore, right? Like it's going to kind of learn who I am, go back to that profile of Mike Trkay and all of that content that is going to be meaningful, relevant to me, and not in the way that the SEO where, once I search for, Mexico vacation once, everything I see for the next 3 weeks says Mexico vacation, targets, but truly who I am as an individual. And it's going to just come to me in a form, in a way that's beyond me kind of going out, reading websites, finding all of that, right?
Well, Mike, I know we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today. Super enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully we'll get a part 2 in the future.
Evan, Saam, thank you guys so much for the time. Really enjoyed talking about not just what AI does, but how FICO's using AI to drive the business. It's been a great time.
Likewise, would echo Evan. Mike, this was an awesome episode. Excited to get it out to our listeners.
That was Mike Trkay, Chief Information Officer at FICO.
Thanks for listening to Enterprise AI Innovators. I'm Saam Motamedi, a general partner at Greylock Partners.
And I'm Evan Reiser, the founder and CEO of Abnormal AI. Please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Learn more about enterprise AI transformation at enterprisesoftware.blog. This show is produced by Abnormal Studios. We'll see you next time.